Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, and to everyone celebrating Sukkot, Chag Sukkot Sameach. We're right now in the process of Gilad Shalit being transferred back to Israel, along with 1,027 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners. And there's a lot to be said about this, but I want to begin with this short excerpt that really gets to the heart of the matter. Let me make sure the speakers are up so you can hear.
The officials said that among the 1,000 to be set free are 300 prisoners sentenced to numerous life sentences in Israel for their role in terror attacks, and said that prisoners from other organizations besides Hamas will also be released.
Okay, so 1,027 for one. This, in the words of Al Jazeera, is an illustration of the asymmetrical conflict. What they mean to say by that is that Israel captures an asymmetrical number of prisoners of war. That's what that means, asymmetrical. They don't mean that it's asymmetrical in the sense that on one side there is a guy who is required to perform military service as an Israeli citizen, a guy who there's no evidence or accusation had directly harmed anybody at any point in his life. And on the other side, you have people who are convicted criminals, and at least in many numerous cases are serious criminals. They don't mean asymmetrical like that, which would sort of be the logical way to understand it, since that is the way that it's asymmetrical. Instead, they mean asymmetrical, like Israel just captures a bunch of people, prisoners of war, and Hamas did too, but Hamas only captured one, and Israel captures so many. Isn't Israel mean? This is, of course, supposed to be journalism, but that's not really the case. It's asymmetrical in the sense that, well, for one, what's new about this case is that Gilad Shalit is whatever, the first Israeli prisoner of war, at least in decades, to be returned home alive. Now, we hear so much about the Islamic rules of war, and that's true. There are Islamic rules of war. The problem is that Hamas doesn't really care about what the Islamic rules of war are any more than most people who claim to be opponents of the Zionists or any of that care. They care about and they'll make excuses for behavior like this because they'll say, "Well, but Israel." There's always a but. There's always a but. There's always a clause in the Islamicate Ummah as to why the rules, as expressed by Muhammad, the rules in the Quran don't apply. And they'll, of course, usually draw from the Sirah accounts of Ibn Ishaq. Ibn Ishaq was writing 150 years after Muhammad, so they'll draw from these polemic accounts, these anti-Jewish accounts, and they'll give reasons why. Yeah, the Quran says this, but, and thus, as Joseph Schacht explains, the Hadith literature ends up taking preeminence over the Quran in practice. Now, if we go by what the Quran says, there's a lovely quote that George Bush, Barack Obama, everybody quotes when they have a Ramadan dinner or on whatever occasion. I don't know, the Cairo speech, the famous Cairo speech of Obama. They all quote this. It's you can turn to to Surah 5 of the Quran, in the 32nd verse or ayah, and It says there, on that account we ordained for the children of Israel that if anyone slew a person, unless it be for murder or spreading mischief in the land, it would be as if he slew the whole of humanity, and that if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved the whole of humanity. Now, this is not a clause for spreading mischief in the land. It's not meaning for murder or spreading mischief in the land, like as defined by Hamas. It's saying, as in the examples given already in the Quran, i.e., Moses and Aaron fighting against people spreading mischief in the land. We have to read that contextually. It's not saying what you define as mischief. It's saying it's saying what the Quran defines as mischief. And that is, of course, just drawing on the biblical stories. But not only was that drawing on the biblical stories, this actual quote, this actual reference that we ordained, that the speaker of the Quran, the author of the Quran, is speaking about having been ordained for the Bani Israel, is a direct quote. Thus, Obama at Cairo, was directly quoting Sanhedrin, the Mishnah Sanhedrin, and also in the Gemara, in the Babylonian Talmud. We see it in Sanhedrin. You can see down here in the Mishnah. You can find it in 4 or 5. In Babylonian Talmud and the Bavli. You can find it in Tractate Sanhedrin as well, 37 Folio A. So this is very well known, well attested to, and this is a cornerstone of Jewish teachings. This is just as famous as that quote is in the Islamic world. It's even more famous in Judaism and in Jewry, in the Jewish world. This is even more famous, even more cornerstone, and really taken to heart. So when people talk about this asymmetrical conflict, and they wonder why Israelis and Jews get so passionate about this guy. Here we see, cardboard cutouts. All like almost like at the end of the Malcolm X movie with Denzel Washington, and you've got the kids and everybody, and they say, "I am Malcolm X, I am Malcolm X." Almost like every Israeli, every Jew could relate to and see themselves as being this prisoner of war. So it's become a very serious issue. It's become something very personal to certainly to every Israeli, and something about something more, about something deeper than it just being one guy, one life. So what's curious then is that every time an offer was advanced, this many prisoners for this one life, it was always shot down. They wanted more. Hamas wanted more and more and more. No, we want this terrorist. We want this murderer set free too. No, you haven't given us enough terrorists. You haven't given us enough murderers. We need even more. This shows us really not only how sick Hamas is, but and their supporters, but how little they ultimately value the lives even of their own people, of the Palestinian people that they claim to be defending. And of course, in the Battle of Gaza, within 1 week, we see that Hamas had murdered and wounded, seriously wounded, over 700 fellow Palestinians. We see all the way back to their Gross Mufti von Jerusalem. We see all the way back to him. We see that the Mufti, that Haj Amin al-Husseini, that he was well known for rounding up Palestinians. We see in the book In Search of Fatima that Ghada Karmi writes about, I think she lists at least 3 different members of her family that were rounded up. And that wasn't even the point of her book. By the Mufti, by the guy who Yasser Arafat describes as his uncle, says is his uncle, by a man who Hamas sees as a hero, by a man who was not simply associates with Adolf Hitler, but a guest of Hitler in Berlin from 1941 throughout the quote-unquote final solution throughout 1945, funded by Adolf Hitler, along with his brother, not Hitler's brother, but Husseini's brother, to foment revolt against Jews in Iraq, literally kicking off the Farhud pogrom in Iraq, where Jews were murdered, chased down with knives, murdered. Innocent people who hadn't done anything, hadn't stolen anyone's goddamned olive trees or any of these other accusations, as if at this point any of the Jews who had legally immigrated and purchased lands and lived in harmony with their Palestinian neighbors had done anything to offend anybody besides being Jewish. Nobody's land was stolen at this time. Nobody's land was stolen in Hebron. Nobody's in the massacres that were going on. These were some of the oldest Jewish communities in the region, and yet we hear, oh no, it's because of this. It's because of this and this and this and this. It's because the right of return, Palestinians can't come home. It's because of all of this that. That's the only reason why there's any Muslims killing Jews. It never happened before. Well, it did happen before. It happened a lot before. And this is really an outgrowth and a continuation of that. So, continuing on, and let's see, here, this is just saying that it's underway. Here we see 1027. Continuing on, the one last thing that I wanted to show you is a mother of Israeli suicide bombing victim. Do not free my daughter's murderer. Here we see her poor daughter, God rest her soul, 15 years old, murdered, eating pizza. Now that's bad enough. Freeing this murderer, freeing anyone responsible for her death is bad enough. But when interviewed, one of the people directly responsible for transporting the bomb, who survived, so not the actual detonator, but the transporter, admitted that she did it. Okay, Tamimi admits that she did it, and she says, "Why should I feel sorry?" When interviewed, the interviewer persists. Would you do it again if you were to have the chance? But Tamimi says yes. Now, this was a reaffirmation of her statement in 2006 when she carried out this murder. This is a person being freed. This is a person being freed. This is who Hamas was demanding. Well, we're not letting this guy go. We're going to send him back dead like all the other Jews, unless we get these murderers. This is one of the people they want. She says, I do not regret what I did, murdering people at a pizzeria, murdering a 15-year-old girl. So, if that's viewed as acceptable, if that's viewed as something that that you stand for, then you really need to take a look at what you're submitting to. If your vision of Islam is a religion of peace, then how do you reconcile that with you standing for the freeing of people like this? How if Islam is a religion of peace, which indeed Islam as articulated by the Quran is, then one would really have to question how you are possibly following that religion if you're defending something that's so antithetical to peace, so directly opposed to peace. This person is saying that they don't regret what they did in murdering innocent people, innocent children, innocent teenagers, just eating pizza. It didn't do anything to anybody, didn't steal anybody's land, didn't prevent anybody from the right of return, didn't, any of these qualms that people have. What did this person do? So now imagine if you're this girl's family, what are you supposed to do? If you're her brother or cousin or anything, and you join the IDF because that's what you do. You're an Israeli citizen. You're in the IDF. How do you think you're going to treat Palestinians when it wasn't just some isolated person who killed your daughter, but the entire government of Gaza is demanding that the murderer of your sister, your daughter, your cousin, whoever this person is in relation to you, demanding that that murderer be set free, and then millions more are chanting, demanding, yelling, screaming in the streets for the freedom of murderers like that. How do you think you're going to treat the Palestinians that you interact with?